Hi there, it's Billy Tarasio with the Modern Divorce Podcast. Today, for another episode with an internal team member here at Modern Law. This is Vanessa Adams, who is our newest team member. Hello, Vanessa.
Hi.
Vanessa is the legal assistant who is running our Peoria office, but that is not why I have asked her to be on the podcast. Before joining Modern Law, Vanessa worked in social work and has a lot of personal experience with DCS, or the Division of Child Services. And many family law clients have DCS somehow involved in their case. Somebody's made allegations, or they have concerns for their children and they're making allegations. And so I'd love to get to know you a little bit more, Vanessa, introduce you to everyone, and then learn a little bit about what you know about DCS.
Okay. So yeah, I did. I worked with the Department of Child Safety for about a year and a half.
Department of
I
Child
was,
Safety. Thank you. It is so hard to get that acronym right. So thank you for saying that.
it is. A lot of people just keep referring it to as CPS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I worked there for about a year and a half, and I was an ongoing case manager. So when you first get a case there, you get an investigations case manager. And then once the case is opened and it's going to stay open, it goes to an ongoing case manager, which was me.
Okay, fantastic. Great. So for a year and a half, you were an ongoing case manager. And what did you do as an ongoing case manager? What was your job?
So there was a lot that you do. So first, when you first get a case, you start out by just introducing yourself to the family, getting to know them, going over the assessments that the investigations did, and you go to court right away. And you establish what services you're going to put in place based off the investigations, and set up visitation. That's a big one, is setting up that visitation right away so that there's no delay in the kids being removed from the home, but still being able to see their parents.
Okay. All right. So it's really great to get a perspective from somebody who is on the inside. Obviously, um, CPS workers or employees or case managers get a terrible reputation as being people who are incompetent and are overworked and don't care. And, basically, it seems like the reputation is there's nothing you can do right. Did you feel like that as a case manager?
Yes, I did feel that way a lot, just because I feel like one bad apple might kind of like tarnish the batch. But also, you're working under so many constraints. So there's DCS policy that you have to work under, but you're also working under the orders of the court. Um, and while the court says, okay, you have to have these visitations in place, you put in, as the case manager, you put in the work order for it, or that's called the referral for that, but you still have to, that has to be dispatched to the place to get the visitation going, but it comes back on you if that's not being dispatched, even though you don't have anything to do with that.
Sure. Okay, I do want to talk about visitation because I think it's such a big deal and so important, but let's back up. How does a case get started? And is there a case opened every time a call is made?
No. So all cases get started by going through a call to the hotline. So somebody feels like a child is being harmed or abused or neglected in some way, they fear for that child's safety, they put a call into the hotline. The hotline can take it as a few things. One, as a status communication, and that's just a notification on a current case that doesn't meet report level. So there might be a case open and it's like a family member found out about the case and they want the DCS case manager to call. So they called the hotline. The hotline notifies through that status communication. Or they can take it as a new report, and that means it has new information, and it can even be on an existing case. So new allegations on a new case, there would have to be a whole new investigation for those.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And so when somebody calls in and they make a report of abuse or neglect, it's either a status update or it's a New report, or it's a new report on an existing case. If it's a new report and there's not an open case, what does DCS do?
So even if it is a case that is open, they all go through the same kind of things. So it's going to go to the hotline. If they say, yes, this is a report, it meets report level, we need to go out and investigate, they're going to give it a priority level. So those range from P1 to P4, and P1 is the most time sensitive. So priority 1, you must go out, make contact within 2 hours.
Wow.
That's how quickly they need to get there. With
Okay.
a P4, it's not until 7 days.
7 days. How serious does the allegation need to be to meet a P1 level?
So because hotline and case management are 2 separate things, I didn't get that part of the training.
Got it.
So I'm not sure on that one, but
Okay.
I do know that it's pretty severe.
Okay. So then you said that there was an initial case manager. Are they the people that do the investigation?
Right. So they're called the investigation case manager. And then we kind of when I was there, we separated it by investigation case manager and ongoing case manager.
Okay. And what do the investigation case managers do?
So they are the ones, so let's say they get a report on their desk. They start pre-commencement, which is gathering like all of the DCS history, all of the DPS history, criminal histories. They're talking to the source. They're gathering as much information as they can prior to making contact with the family. And then they go out and make that initial contact. So they go to the house to conduct the interviews. They do a walkthrough of the home. And for the interviews, they're interviewing everybody in the household. So parents, kids, any other adults that are in the household. They're interviewing everybody they can so that they can gather information for that assessment that I was talking about, the family functioning assessment.
Okay.
So they need to gather all of that information, and that helps them to determine, one, if a safety threat is actually occurring, and the truthfulness of those allegations.
Okay. So what did you say that was called? A functional family assessment?
A family functioning assessment, FFA.
Family functioning assessment. And what is being assessed exactly?
So the household is being assessed. Every household member is being assessed. So it talks about the extent and circumstances regarding the maltreatment. It talks about the child's functioning, adult functioning, their parenting practices, how they discipline. It also goes over behavioral capacities, emotional capacities, and cognitive capacities. And those are things like, does the parent take action? If there's a safety, like, is the child putting their hand on the stove? Are they going to go and grab them? Do they have a history of protecting? Are they understanding their children's developmental levels, like a 2-year-old, what their expectation should be rather than a 14-year-old? Do they understand those kinds of things?
Okay, so that is a huge job. And some of those things are so subjective. So do you know what type of training and qualifications the investigating officers have to, or investigating caseworkers need to have?
Yeah, so when we got hired on, you go through 6 weeks of what's called core training. And in that, you're learning cultural competencies, you're learning the definitions of abuse and neglect, different ways that manifest, how households function differently. It goes over, it's very extensive, and there's weeks that you spend just on how to gather this information for the FFA.
Wow. Okay, Vanessa, let's take a quick second and talk about your educational background. What is your educational history?
So I got my associates at GCC, and I went on to ASU and got my bachelor's in, what was my bachelor's in? Psychology and criminal justice.
Mhm.
And then I went on and did a master's program there with forensic psychology.
Okay, so you certainly had a lot of background, a lot of education. When you went in and you got this 6 weeks of training, did you find it to be sufficient?
I found it to be very sufficient in the ongoing stage or in the investigation stages.
Okay.
So I feel like it was very informational. You got everything you needed, and they gave you, like, I came out with notebooks of information. For the ongoing side, I feel like that kind of could have used a little bit more training
Mhm.
in that aspect, but every case is different. So it's kind of
Sure.
hard to do that. So I'm not sure.
So after this FFA, what are the possible outcomes?
So possible outcomes, they're going to substantiate. That means that the child is unsafe and a plan needs to be put in place. They're either going to have to remove or put in a family member or something, or they can unsubstantiate and say, no, I don't see a safety threat occurring here, and close the case. And that's it.
I want to take a quick minute here because this is really important. Um, Police officers are investigating to determine whether or not something happened in the past and whether or not they have enough proof to show a crime happened. DCS is looking to determine right now and moving forward, is your child in danger?
Right.
And this is really important for parents to know. If something has happened in your home and you know somebody has called CPS, it is your job at that time to make sure your children are safe at that time. So let's say a step sibling was violent with a kiddo of yours or something like that. It is important for you to make sure whatever threat happened that caused this investigation is handled by you moving
Right.
forward. And so that might mean that it's a good idea for you to take that step sibling and put them on a different schedule where they never see your child or something like that. And if you have eliminated any potential safety threat, it is a great way to stop CPS from moving to another level because there's no possible threat of ongoing harm.
Right. That's a good point to make, because that goes into, is the parent taking action? Yes, this happened, but what did they do about it?
Sure.
And what are they doing to mitigate that in the future?
Yeah.
And so that would also go into the FFA saying, okay, yeah, this did happen, but they did A, B, and C and made a safety plan on their own. And
Mhm.
so they have that cognition to understand that their primary role is to protect their children,
Mhm.
and they're
And
taking it seriously.
this is really hard because as a lawyer, I am always, we are always telling people admit nothing. Like admit nothing. It is the police's job to prove something happened. And CPS is a sort of prosecutorial agency because, of course, there's a child abuse registry and CPS and the police talk. So, depending on what it is that you say to CPS, you could be charged with a crime. So, the lawyer part in me is like, you need to be really careful what you say to CPS. But then the other part of me is is hedging that a little bit because you have to be willing and you have to be capable of showing that you're going to protect your children, which sometimes means you have to admit that something happened.
Right. There is a line, and it kind of goes against what, like, as a person you would want to do, because you don't want to admit your faults. You don't want to admit that these things happened. But with DCS, the more open that you are and the more honest you are, I feel like it's for the better for you, because
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand that perspective and I can see that and I can see how that would be correct. I would also encourage people to talk to a lawyer before they even have the CPS discussion, if at all possible, because you have to figure out how to be open and honest and transparent and instill confidence in the CPS worker and not admit to a crime that could land you in jail.
right, because there is criminal conduct cases and it could be transferred over to that.
Okay, let's talk about
Um,
that. What does that mean?
So criminal conduct cases usually involved OCWI, which is where those are higher level of investigators. I
Okay,
think they're
so
actually,
OCWI is, what does that stand for?
um, I am not sure about it.
Okay, so we had to look this up because it's really important, but we didn't know what OCWI stood for. So what does that stand for?
So it's Office of Child Welfare Investigations.
Okay, now how are these different from the type of investigator that you were?
So these are like previous actual cops, actual police officers. They have badges, they work and they do like the forensic interviews type of things. They work on all of the criminal conduct cases.
Okay, so I'm looking at like an open application. I'm not even sure you have to have been a police officer.
No, you do not actually.
Okay, so but you are given a badge and you are investigating a crime. So your job is not only just to keep kiddos safe, but you are also involving some sort of criminal issues. So if do you know as a parent if OCWI is coming or if CPS is coming?
I don't believe that there's the distinction until they get there. So you wouldn't know.
But when they're there, one of the things that you should probably ask is, which organization are you with? Would that be enough? Or what would you need to ask?
So you could ask to see their badge because their badge is going to say OCWI or it's just going to say case manager.
So if you're talking to OCWI, you really need to be more careful. You probably need to say less. You probably need to get yourself an attorney and if you can, get your kiddo out of there to go stay with grandma or grandpa or like neutralize whatever threat there could have possibly been and then be quiet because you're under investigation for a crime.
Definitely have a plan. But I think it is important to note that how I mentioned, like the first thing you do is go to court. You are appointed an attorney if you cannot afford one. So you do get an attorney and they attend that first hearing with you. So before you go to that hearing, it's called a conference. So you meet and it's for an hour and we go over all the things that we're going to say in the court hearing, what we agree to, what you're not going to agree to. And then we go into the court hearing, let the judge make his rulings.
Okay. So
right
let's
there.
say something's happened. Let's say you got into a fight with your teenager. Your teenager was super bratty. You got into a fight. Maybe you wanted them to be drug tested. I don't know. There was something that happened that involved some sort of a physical altercation between you and your teenager. And CPS has now come in and they're investigating. That your kiddo told their other parent called CPS. CPS substantiates, yes, there was this physical altercation between you and your teenager. What would you be asked to agree to with CPS at that point?
So you're going to, so domestic violence, they're going to ask for probably some classes to be taken. They're going to put in some services. Visitation is going to be probably supervised until we can determine if this is something that doesn't need to be supervised. Also, maybe even talking with the psychiatrist, the unit psychologist, and seeing if it's appropriate to even have visitation at that time.
So would the psychologist talk to the child or the parent?
They would talk to the case manager. So the case manager would go over all of the details with the unit psychologist. And then if needed, she may talk to the child.
Okay. So this is another thing that gets really tricky. You're allowed in Arizona criminally to physically discipline your children. CPS may determine that physical discipline was child abuse or is child abuse.
Right. If it's over like an extent. So I kind of think about it like you wouldn't hit a 2-year-old or like spank a 2-year-old the same way you would spank a 14-year-old. It's just kind of understanding there's boundaries and trying to be on the other side of those boundaries, not on the extensive end of that.
Absolutely. I think what you're saying is really important. While it is legal to physically discipline your children, what is appropriate and not appropriate discipline is going to be very different depending on the person that you're talking to and how they view the world and
right.
what they consider is reasonable.
And I think it is also legal in Arizona to leave your child home alone.
It is
and you just have to determine that as a parent. So thinking about it again, I wouldn't leave. I mean, I have a 5 and a 9-year-old. I wouldn't leave them home alone.
Right.
So,
and that's a tough one. So when is it neglect? You're allowed to leave your children home alone if they are mature enough, if they are responsible enough, if it's for a reasonable amount of time. We had one client who left her 16-year-old in charge of her something like 5 to 8-year-old for a weekend.
Oh.
And CPS did not find that to be appropriate and ended up charging her with neglect, becoming very, very involved with her life for years and years and years because of that decision she made.
Right. And I think it's also good to note that there are, though you're not supposed to have biases and you're supposed to think of every case, like every case manager is not going to do things the same. They're not going to see things the same. They're not going to articulate things the same way either. So I feel like that's where we see the differences. Like, why would they substantiate on this and not substantiate on this? And I think it's because of different case managers represent in different ways.
Absolutely. So after you go to that initial court hearing, you said you're going to have a court order probably for visitation.
Right. So visitation is always set up at least 2 times for, I think for younger children, it's 2 times for 2 hours a week. Or sometimes you can do 1 time for 4 hours a week.
And supervisors, can they be either family members or friends or neighbors or a professional organization, or is it always a professional organization?
So that varies, because if your child is removed but placed with your parents and your parents say it's okay that you can come over and visit the child, and the DCS case manager is confident in the parent's ability to mitigate the threat. So let's say you're using substances. Are they able to recognize when you're using those? Are they able to tell you? Do they have enough in them to be able to tell you, like, you got to go? So I think it just varies by case on that too.
Okay, so if there is a family court, if you've got a divorced parent, and let's go back to the example where there's a physical altercation between you and your teenager, and CPS has decided this is child abuse, you were way over the line, will they automatically place the child with their other parent?
If that parent, if they're in separate households and that parent is determined to be safe and there's no threats against or allegations against that parent, then DCS wouldn't be removing, because there is a safe and appropriate parent.
Okay.
That child with.
So then what I've heard a lot of times is, when parents are together in that situation, DCS will tell the non-abusive, let's just use that term, the non-abusive parent, you need to get divorced, or you have to get an order of protection, or you have to take action to show that you're going to be in a separate household. Did you have that come up at all?
I had it come up, not in the fact when they were married, but when the abusers are still together and still want to be in that relationship together, then I had to include that other person, even though he wasn't a father on the case. I had to include him in those services, because I have to be confident, if I put these children back in this house, is domestic violence going to continue? So I needed to have him do some domestic violence classes. And so it could just pull in other people into your case.
And if you've got 2 parents that live in different households, and mom had an altercation and is abusive, or dad did, whatever, and the other parent is safe, not a threat, at that point, does DCS close the case because you have a parent able to take care of that child, or does the case stay open against that other parent?
So this is where the lines are kind of blurred for me. So I do know that the family functioning assessment is done per household. So it's going to be done in the abusing household and then in the non-abusing household. So if it's opened in this one, but closed in this one, logically thinking, and from what I've experienced, I would say it would be closed because the child has a safe and appropriate parent.
Yeah. And I think at that point, the issue is if the safe and appropriate parent is not taking steps to keep the child safe from the abusive parent, that's when CPS may move forward. And when
Right.
CPS tells you instead you need to file something in family court, it's probably because of that situation. CPS needs to know that the kiddo is going to be safe from the abusive parent, and family court can take care of that. And you as the parent can take care of that as long as you're willing to go file something in family court to let the family court know what happened and take care of whatever issues there are.
Yeah. Are you taking action again? And do you have it in you to say to the father of your child, no, you can't see them,
Mm,
or no, I can't let you come to the house, or no, you can't bring a birthday present, or it gets hard when because you've had a relationship with this person
mhm,
and you have a child with this person.
mhm,
So having that backbone to say that is where DCS needs to have the confidence.
mhm. And it's also really hard because I could see, like, just putting myself in that situation, if somebody who had an altercation with a teenager, wanted to come over and bring a birthday present, and I was confident that in that interaction there would be no safety threat, you might think logically that you can do that. But if you do, you are putting you are risking that the CPS case manager may not agree with you.
Right. If that case manager has a different view on that than you did, because things happen at the spur of the moment. So anything could happen, even if they're only there for like 5 minutes, anything could happen, right? If you have a case manager thinking that way, then they may not think that they may not have confidence in your abilities.
So in my opinion, as parents, as parents who are good parents, the best thing you can possibly do is get CPS out of your life as quickly as possible. And that probably means jumping through a lot of hoops and maybe sucking up and telling people exactly what they want to hear because you want them out of your life.
Right. I would do anything and everything that they say. And I know that there's a lot of waiting with DCS, because the case managers have so many cases, right? So they have to respond to all of these people. You might be waiting for a week or something. I would follow up and follow up and follow up and just be there and be as communicative as possible.
This is important. I think this is really good advice because um, parents can lose their mind without knowing where their kids are. I
Yes,
completely understand that.
right.
Um, and so but you can't lose it on your caseworker. You cannot.
No, you can't do it. You can't.
So when you're following up and following up and following up, you also have to do it in the most polite and kind way, even though you're dying inside.
Yes, and that's something I thought about all the time is when these visitations, there could be a list and they could not see their kid for maybe a couple weeks.
Mm,
And though that's unacceptable, it happens.
mhm,
And it's even unacceptable with the courts, but it happens.
mhm.
As a mom, not seeing or knowing exactly where my child is, I I don't know. Just thinking about that makes me feel sad.
Right, 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 right. So, I mean, the best thing you can do, really, the best thing you can do is prevent this from happening. Handle it as appropriately as you possibly can if CPS is going to be involved. Get advice, get help, jump through whatever hoops they want, be polite, be persistent, be patient. What else? What else can you tell parents they should
I
do?
think about that as like keep your enemies closer. So that case manager would be my best friend, my best friend.
How many cases did you have when you were a case manager?
So it varies in and out, but so you go by caseload, but you also go by kid count. So because you have to see every single one of your kids every month. So I believe I got up to about 35, 40 kids.
40 kids, and you needed to see them every month.
Yes, every single month you had to go to the house that they're living in, be that family members or foster care, um, or a foster family. You are making sure the house is still appropriate, trying to determine safety and making sure, like asking the kids flat out, do you feel safe? And that gets a little rough with little kids.
Right, right. Wow. So I can only guess, but why did you leave that position?
Well, it became a lot. I felt like I was taking away from my own family, and I wanted to put families back together, but when it became taking away from my own family, I can't do that. I have my own kids too. But also I didn't see a lot of reunification.
Really?
Right. I did reunify a couple families, but I did also have to sever rights. Um, and I just didn't feel good about it.
So you felt like reunifications weren't happening quickly enough, they weren't happening often enough. Did you see mostly good families?
I saw a lot of drug abuse taking, that's what was taking the families down, honestly, holding them down, and the inability to, like, they weren't at a point where they could make a change because they were so deep into it.
Oh man.
And so then you get to the point where you can't keep a kid in care forever. So
Right.
you have to make some decisions for permanency for the children.
Got it. Got it. So drug abuse is really making is what you see as the number one reason children are coming into custody?
That's a lot of what I saw. I saw a lot of drug abuse, a lot of mental health.
Mm.
I had a cognitive delay one
Parent.
case,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, of where both mother and father were cognitively delayed.
Mm-hmm.
So that was hard for them because, it's just they need to learn, but also this baby's just born. It needs to be safe.
Right. 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 It just sounds like the hardest job.
It's hard to balance when, because you got to be tough and you have to like put up this wall, but also I just want to help you. Like,
Right. Right.
it,
Yeah. Okay, Vanessa, what else? Is there anything I've missed? I feel like this has been a fantastic episode. Is there anything that we've missed that people really need to know?
no, I just will really reiterate the part of make that case manager your best friend, talk to that case manager, meet with them. You're allowed to meet with them at least once a month. They're supposed to be meeting with them at least once a month. So do that. They're going to give you a service letter at that meeting. Check off all of those services and just jump through those hoops.
Jump through the hoops, just do it. Do
Do
you
it.
find that the resources that CPS offers can and do help people?
They can if you participate, if you actually engage and do it and go in with an open mind, not just like, oh, I'm here because DCS made me.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, maybe there might be a real problem. So let me go in and do this and do my best and then be
I'll
done.
tell you, the client that I was talking about before who left her kiddos for a weekend and ended up having CPS involved for a long time in her life, she did all of those classes. She did all of the love and logic classes. She ended up taking parenting classes after CPS was out. She found them to be so valuable. She found that she had so many more tools as a parent because she had been a single mom for a long time. And by taking advantage of learning new things outside of her culture, outside of her own upbringing, she found it to be really, really valuable.
And it's all free. You're getting it all free. I did have one client actually thank me and thank DCS for coming into her life because, and that was one of the families I was actually able to reunify. When the case came in, she didn't even know where her 6-month-old was. She didn't even know where the baby was. She was on drugs in a hotel room. And by the end, she had gotten an apartment, she had gotten a job, she got in a car, she'd finished all of her classes, she's been participating in additional classes, and I was actually able to reunify. And that was the best.
That's a great story. That's a fantastic story. I mean, you have very few options if CPS does take custody of your kids. You can either invest in that process and do what they need you to do and get your kids back and try to make your life better. Try to make, take what they're giving you and make it work for you. Or you can fight them, probably lose your kids and not get anything out of these free resources. So I think that that's a fantastic message.
I do too. That was my best case.
Good job, Vanessa.
Yay.
And I'm so happy that we have you here at Modern Law. Thank you for this time. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.